welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. Beginning of another week, although some of us are having a little trouble distinguishing when weeks end and begin, not Themis. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting a look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Well, Themis Klarides has been making Connecticut tick for a long time, and she just made a big decision that we're going to understand how she's planning to help make things tick moving on. Themis is the Republican leader of the State House of Representatives. She's been a state representative for 22 years in the 114th district. That's, I believe, Seymour and Derby and Ansonia, or do I have that wrong? Woodbridge?
Nope.
I'm sorry, we lost your connection, Themis. Uh-oh. We'll get you back in a second. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Themis? Harry Droz, our station manager. We seem to have lost the connection to Themis.
Yep, she's freezing.
Oh, okay. So we'll wait for a second while her internet unfreezes. And Themis has decided to step down, along with her colleague in the state Senate, Republican leader Len Fasano. And they're going to not be running for re-election this year, which is big news in the Capitol, where every day they are the voice of the Republican Party. That's sometimes been the majority, sometimes been the minority up there. But that doesn't mean things are over for Themis. So Themis, do we have you now?
You have me now.
Okay, so now your district includes
all of Woodbridge, about 2/3 of Orange, and half of Derby.
Oh, I got that one really wrong. Okay.
Yeah,
and
you're probably conflating part of my sister's district.
Right, there's a Klarides dynasty. Your sister's a state rep as well. So Themis, what brought on your decision to, after 22 years, to not be a state rep anymore?
Well, some people would argue that I should have had that decision way before 22 years, because that's an awfully long time. But I can't tell you, that it was one thing or the other. I mean, excuse me if I get emotional when we talk about any of this, and a lot of people don't understand it, but I mean, this has been my life for 22 years. And we like to say in the House Republicans, we're not colleagues, we're a family. And they've been my second family for a very long time, for that 22 years. And I can tell you all the important things that have happened in my life in 22 years. If we were in session, if we were out of session, if it was election year, if it wasn't election year, I mean, it has been the bellwether for everything that I've done. And the past 6 years as leader has just been the biggest honor I could have ever had, and the most amazing experience. But at a certain point, you say to yourself, enough is enough. You want to move on? Do you want to try other things? Do you want to have different experiences? I have two older parents who obviously need more time and our attention all the time. And I'm grateful for every minute we get to spend with them. I have my own family and friends, and I would like to see what else is out there and do everything I can for the rest of this year, because I'm still state representative until the first week of January, and I'm still leader until then, to get us through this COVID horrific experience, to start running races when the time is right for health and safety, and see where that takes us.
And Themis, how are you feeling personally vis-a-vis COVID-19 and the people around you and your parents? Everyone well? Are people safe?
Well, every time anybody asks me, I knock on wood, which I'm doing now, and I thank God my parents, who are 88, are fine. They are banned from leaving the house, not left the house, and we won't go in the house. I mean, even during Easter, I did it yesterday. Every couple days I'll go and I'll sit on the front porch with the screen door, and I'll talk to my parents through the door. I'm not going to take that chance, even though we're all mostly quarantined. We go to the supermarket, right? You go to the drugstore, you see people here and there. And since the craziest number of all to me is that up to 50% of the people are asymptomatic.
Right.
So none of us know what we don't have. And God forbid I got it or my sister got it. God willing, we'd think we would, just like a horrible flu, you'd be able to get through it. But I would never take that chance with my parents. So we have not even seen them. And my mother always tries to hug us. And I have to explain to her every day, Mom, no touching. Oh, yeah, the thing.
And as a legislator, you guys, tell me if I'm wrong about this. I got the sense that in Connecticut, we've really been able to deal with this in terms of politics and government. I haven't been seeing the fighting with Democrats and Republicans. I'm not saying you agree about everything, I'm saying that I feel like you guys have sort of governed all together in a bipartisan way. Is that true?
I would say for the most part, I mean, as you said, I mean, nobody agrees on everything all the time, but we've had leaders meetings usually once a week with the governor's office. We've had individual conversations with our colleagues that are leaders, you know, on the same side and the other side on most days. We talk to the governor's office on most days. So we've agreed on a lot of things, but I think the biggest difference is uh, I think Senator Fasano and I and our caucuses believe there should be a little bit more of an incremental approach to this. Uh, Meaning this, we don't, under no circumstances do we think health and safety should not be the first and foremost thing we look at. We are not health experts. There are health experts all around us, all around the governor, all around the Capitol, all around this country that know much better than we do. We've seen some states start to open up again. Clearly, those states are not states that were affected the way we were. But when you look at a state like Florida, you've seen the northern portions of that state started to open their beaches. Now, there's a big difference in my mind with Florida and us because it's so big, it's so much bigger that we know that Dade County and Broward County, the two southernmost counties in Florida, have had the largest amount of COVID in the whole state. So people, it's easy to try and compare and contrast other states with ours, but it's also easy to differentiate those. So you know, we have encouraged the governor, the governor's office, our Democrat colleagues, who I think generally agree with us that we need to see what this plan is. You know, we've talked to Dr. Koh and Indra Nui, who are clearly very accomplished people in their fields, but when they first were appointed to this commission for the state of Connecticut to reopen it when the time is right, we first spoke with them on day 3, and they kept repeating, well, we've only been here for 3 days, so we certainly can't have a full-blown plan, which we understood. But last week we met again with them via call, and they had the same answer. You know, and I said 3 days, I agree, but now we're 10 days in, and you say you're not going to have a plan for a couple of weeks. People, I think, in this state, and generally speaking, understand that it's not time for Connecticut to open. Connecticut is not Georgia, right? Connecticut is not a lot of these states. We are right next to New York. We've had very serious cases. This is a highly contagious disease, but we need to see a plan of what it's going to look like when that time comes. I think that that's fair. I think clearly we all understand we're going to continue social distancing. We're going to wear masks when necessary. Who knows if opening up of restaurants, et cetera, are going to be staggered and the capacity is going to be less. I mean, there's a million ways to look at this. But I think when you look at the Georgia example, the thing that blows my mind is one of the first things they opened was movie theaters.
Mm.
I don't know if I'll ever go to a movie theater the rest of my life. After knowing what I know, I mean, it's one big capsule of germs. It's you
Yeah.
know, it's pairs with material and I mean, the idea that in between every movie, so a staff person is going to come in and wipe down every inch of that place is so. I mean, I think I think the beaches in northern Florida is a great idea. I'm glad our beaches are still open for the most part in this state, as long as people can be responsible. I think they've been mostly responsible. It's been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, and we're talking to Themis Clarity, the House leader for the House Republican leader, state rep for 22 years, a household name in especially the Valley, but elsewhere in Connecticut. And she's stepping down, but she's still got the rest of this term to go and other plans up her sleeve. Themis, when I think about this question, I do think it's one of these issues that doesn't feel like you get angry at anybody. There's so many unknowns, you know. You talk about 50% of people being asymptomatic, have immediate fun time businesses opening where everyone's crowded together like a movie theater or a nightclub. It sounds like we probably will have more stores open with strict rules. What how do you answer some of these questions that even Dr. Koh's not going to know? When 50% are asymptomatic, how are you going to know you're not going to get, how your parents aren't going to get sick going out?
Well, I think the first thing, and again, I'm no medical expert, and so, you know, we've been very clear about the no more the medical expert even anywhere close to what they know. But I think when you have to take all the medical information and then add a little common sense to it. And I
Mhm.
recognize that today is not the day. right? And
Yeah.
next week is the day, and the week after is not the day. But at some point, I mean, they were using the time frame recently of the beginning of June. So let's just use that as a hypothetical.
Hmm.
Um, when you talk about my parents or people that are in vulnerable groups, in their 80s in particular and older, certainly even in their 70s, I think those people are still not going to be able to leave their house
Yeah.
for a while. I mean, we have to be realistic about this. I mean, my mother, the thing my mother is most upset about is she cannot go to weekly appointments. She doesn't care
Her weekly
about
what?
hair appointments.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't care about anything else but her hair appointments. And she calls, I'm told, twice a week to see if she can make a hair
Yeah.
appointment. Like, Mom, trust me, I'll be the first person to let you know when you can go because I don't want to hear it anymore.
Do you
But
think in June we'll be able to send someone to your mom's house from the salon to do her hair?
I don't know. I think maybe in June my mom will be able to go there if she wants. If the hair salons are possibly, I mean, are possibly taking one appointment at a time, right? So
Yeah.
those are some of the ideas. I mean, we were discussing this 2 weeks ago in a leaders call, Republicans and Democrats, and we used an example of the northern part of the state of Connecticut or the northeastern part of the state, for example, where the incidents of COVID are much less than in our part of the state and west. And possibly if a barber shop wanted to start taking appointments, say on the hour, and these are just hypothetical suggestions, but I think some of these are ways the time is right that we can start opening things. So if you know your barber's there and he has a mask on and he has gloves, you're going in for your hair appointment, and then you leave and get in your car, nobody else comes in until the next appointment. I mean, those are ways that we can, even regionally, possibly different parts of the state, start to open up. I mean, anybody who thinks we can just go to sleep on Sunday night with everything closed and wake up on Monday morning and everything's back to normal is unrealistic, clearly. But there are ways to look at this, ways other people have done it, and possible ways to slowly start opening. Again, not today,
All right.
but when the health experts think it might be safe to slowly start phasing this in.
We're talking to Themis Klarides, state rep, state house leader on WNHH's Dateline New Haven, 103.5 FM live streamed on newhaven.org. Station manager Harry Droz. I hear we have some comments from our listeners. What do they have to say?
Joseph Salmeri says, please run for governor. Kathy.
You got your first foot, Themis. Haven't even decided. Anything else,
I can
Harry?
only make one decision.
Kathy Wood Paletti says, I'm hearing the governor is looking into an executive order for absentee ballots. Desiree Brooks, sorry to see you go, but marriage, travel, and fun times ahead for you. Good luck.
Travel.
Lisa Mack says, thank you for all you do. Kathleen Cormier says, there's an interesting TED Talk on ethical plan for ending the pandemic. Check it out. Rodney Williams says, I watch her every Sunday. She's a fighter. I'm in Ward 21. Can she find some time to help create a way for the water to flow into the valley? This issue needs more than one party to solve. Both parties need to work together to help all businesses in the state.
Hey, thanks for those.
And then one more. Tamara Collins quotes Boris Yeltsin, contain impatience.
Now, that was an interesting last comment, Themis. Hey, everybody, thanks for those comments. I want to pick a couple of them out to ask Themis. Themis, Rodney Williams is in the city of New Haven, which is not a place where Republicans often are very active at the state level. I think what he's talking about water in the valley, he's talking about the aid that's supposed to go to small businesses. And as you and the whole world knows, it's incredible how little of the aid meant to help small businesses filtered down to small businesses. The state program closed in a day, and people who knew best how to work the system and had big banks helping them got it. Nationwide, we're reading every day about big corporations that are paying their executives millions of dollars and not losing money and getting most of the aid meant for small business. How about Rodney's question? How can both parties work together to get more of that help to people in the Valley or the New Haven Valley to reopen their businesses?
Well, let me first say that I know Senator Fasano and I definitely, and I think some of my Democrat leaders also. Before that 25 million, that first pool of $25 million for the bridge loan, the state bridge
Yeah,
loan came out. You know, I I threw out the number $1 billion just to make the point that $20 million is going to last 3 seconds.
yeah,
Uh, we then ended the call 2 days before they started this program, saying, I mean, just to throw out a number, we believe 120 million. I mean, if you don't start out with 120 million, you're not going to get anything from this. And they of course said thank you, thank you, thank you. And then 2 days later, they came out with a plan of 25 million. As you know, that went in a couple seconds. A couple days later, they did another 25 million. That went in about 6 seconds. And so from day one, we believe very strongly that that amount of money that the state put in for those bridge loans was nowhere near enough. And
yeah.
that bore fruit within seconds of them putting it out. As far as so I certainly believe there needs to be more money put into that. End of story. And we did before they even did the plan. As far as the federal loans go, I think we're in a very difficult place because we say small business. And small business, I think, to your average, when you talk about big business, what do you think of? IBM, right? I mean, you think of like these huge monstrosities of businesses. But unfortunately, these businesses that have 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees ended up being small business by the definition. And when I think of small business, and listen, they're suffering too. I'm not trying to diminish what they're going through because they're part of what drives our economy. But I think what your listener asked was, and what they're thinking of, and exactly what I've been thinking of, and a lot of us. It's about the guy that owns the coffee shop on the corner with 2 employees. It's about the lady that owns the gas station down the street
And the
with 3
sheetrocker who's got
mechanics.
has a crew of 8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's dry cleaner, right? It's those kind of things, and those are the people that have suffered. I mean, I have a little in Derby, a little deli bakery. These two older Italian people, they've owned it forever. It's everybody goes to this place, and they have themselves, the husband and wife, and the daughter that work there. They're the people that aren't getting the money, and they're the people that need the money because that's what puts food on their table and helps pay their mortgage.
So
Right
Themis,
now,
in
it's
addition to the
all great.
amount not being enough, which everybody agrees, the
Yeah.
amount needs to be a lot more. What we've watched on the ground, I think you have too, is even when the money's out there, it's hard to get it to the people you're describing. You have to have your paperwork real quick. You have to get on these computer systems that break every 7 seconds. I mean, I had to try over and over again over days to get through in our computer system, when I was applying for the small business loan. And you don't have someone extra on staff who can do that. Do you think there are mechanical ways, in addition to having more money available, to make sure it gets to the little guy?
Well, let's talk about the little guy in mechanical ways. When you look at the Connecticut Department of Labor and the problem we've had with the unemployment payments going out, we run on a system called COBOL,
Yeah.
COBOL. And it's apparently such an old system that the last known person that knew how to run it was Fred Flintstone. And since that generation is gone, we couldn't find anybody else to operate it since they were inundated with unemployment claims once this happened. They finally found some people that were able to run it, and they started to get that up and running. But the biggest problem was in Connecticut, when you just talk about unemployment for Connecticut unemployment, don't add any of this federal stimulus money, because remember, everybody's supposed to get $600 extra on top of their regular Connecticut unemployment check. Connecticut unemployment checks range from $15 to I think $647, something around there. When you add the extra $600 federal stimulus money for unemployment, that clearly goes over $1,000 in a lot of circumstances, right? Because all you have to do is add 600 and 400 and anything over 400. Well, the Connecticut system was not able to handle numbers over $999.
Oh no, I didn't know
So
that.
that so that's the main reason why people have not gotten their checks out.
Wow.
So they're starting to fix that. We were told 2 weeks ago that was supposed to start this week. but I don't know anybody who's gotten the extra $600 yet. And I will say this: they're working very hard at the Department of Labor. This is not anything they could have anticipated, nor could any of us. But I think it's taught everybody that we have to make sure that these systems are working properly, because you never know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, with unemployment, that's hurting the people that need our help the most.
Yeah.
They need help the most. And they haven't gotten checks in weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unacceptable.
Yeah. So that's it.
So that's the problem.
One caller, Themis. Then one caller brought up elections, absentee ballots. Some people would like everyone to get an absentee ballot. You can't really do that permanently in Connecticut, I believe, until we have a constitutional amendment. I won't go into all the details here that you know well, that will just take a long time to explain. But we can't just say today we're permanently going to let everyone vote in by mail. But we can, I believe, take a one-time decision to have everyone get mailed an absentee ballot. Denise Merrill, the Secretary of State, is suggesting that. This is a complicated issue. Some of us in cities have followed absentee ballot fraud over the years, and we're not as ready to jump in to it. But other people say, we don't want your mother to have to go out and vote. Well, she's elderly anyway. But other people, like in Wisconsin, probably got sick and might die because they went and voted or worked in polling places. What's your feeling on the short term and the long term question about allowing everyone to vote by absentee ballot?
Well, this question first came up in March, when about a week before we started closing things down in Connecticut. The Secretary of State wanted to know if we would agree to an isolated, no-fault balloting just for the presidential primary. That was the first issue that came up. And so we all finally agreed that the answer was, that presidential primary is supposed to be, tomorrow or something, or the end of April, last week or tomorrow. And the answer was, let's just postpone the primary. Because in the middle of March, we were hoping that June would be okay. Instead of playing these games and worry everybody's concerns about absentee ballots and fraud and all of that kind of stuff, let's just push it forward 6 weeks and call it a day. Then, of course, Senator Sanders got out of the race. It became a moot point on the Democrat side. It's really a moot point on the Republican side. So now we're continuing to have conversations about whether that will even go forward or not. But having said that, the next group of conversations we've had is about what are we going to do in August and what are we going to do in November. And I made it very clear from my perspective, there should be no conversation about what's going to happen in November, because it's only April. And I think that by August, we should be okay in regards to the voting thing for the primaries in August. But if we're not, we will know that ahead of time, and we'll be able to take whatever steps are necessary. I mean, there's no reason to paint this whole thing with a broad brush right now. We have time to fix it. But to your original point, you're right. This has to be a constitutional amendment to change it completely. But the way, if people wanted to change it, which we don't, but if they did, I can't remember the exact words, but it's something in the statute that says, it gives the reasons why you can have excuse balloting. It's like illness or out of state or whatever that is, for his or her. And so we would just change it to something. I'm paraphrasing now because I can't remember the exact language. Not just for his or her health, but it would be for health reasons.
Right.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So that, if it's not healthy to go out in general, not just because not you're sick, but it's just not in the best interest of your health to leave the house, then you could do it. That would be the way to do it. And
how do you feel ultimately? Do you want people to be able to all vote from home by mail, or do you want people, if they can, to have to show up at a polling place and vote?
I think there's a hypothetical answer and the realistic answer. I want people to show up and vote if they can, because I think it helps us with controlling fraud issues. I think that right now, whether it's right or wrong, people get absentee ballots, whether it fulfills the statute requirement or not, right?
Okay.
I mean, they do. Let's be honest. If you think in a month from now you may be out of town, that's not technically a reason you can get a legal reason to get an absentee ballot, right? But people do it anyway. Nobody's going to stop them. I think our biggest problem right now with voting is the same day registration. That's the biggest problem by far.
So
And that's why
Democrats always believe in expand. They always argue let more people vote, make it easier. And there's a whole separate set of questions that aren't as true here as they are in the South, where there are deliberate efforts to like have polling places be far away and questions don't let people vote. But here, in Wisconsin, when they had this argument about whether the people vote, the academic research showed, Themis, that it's not true that Democrats do better when everybody can vote. In states like Colorado and Oregon, where everyone can mail in their votes, it's just not true that Democrats win. Like President Trump said, if we do all mail-in voting, Republicans will never win an election. Although it did show up in Wisconsin, they said that the Republican Supreme Court justice lost because of mail-in partly. But how do you feel about that? My gut tells me that I believe the research, that we're arguing about this the wrong way, that it's not true that if we had easier to vote, Republicans would do worse than Democrats.
I think it depends on the state. I think it depends on the office. I think it depends on the candidates for the office. I just think it depends on a lot of things. My bigger concern, not so much, Republicans or Democrats doing worse or better, is we have a good amount of fraud in our balloting. I mean, you mentioned that right when we started this question about New Haven. We see what's gone on in Bridgeport. We see what's going on in Hartford. Obviously, the bigger cities are it's a bigger problem. But I think that's a big problem. And although I think hypothetically it would be nice to give people the option of voting from home or not, realistically, it's hard to do that in a way that gives people a sense of legitimacy in an election. So I think it's anybody who will tell you that they're absolutely one way for or another are thinking about all the pros and the cons. Because if you really do, you can see both sides of it.
State Representative Themis Claride, Republican leader of the General Assembly's House of Representatives, here on Dateline New Haven, WNHH 103.5 FM, live streamed, New Haven Independent.org. Thanks for the questions and comments, folks. We will get to those in a minute. But Themis, you're retiring after 22 years in this job as state representative, but you're not retiring from politics. Let me ask you, over your 22 years, what has changed? How are you different as a legislator from what you were like 22 years ago?
You cut out for a second. So what?
How are you different as a legislator from what you were like 22 years ago?
Well, 22 years ago, I didn't. 23 years ago, I didn't even know that I actually wanted to run for office. I had a very good friend of mine that actually just retired from the U.S. Attorney's Office and is running for Congress in the 5th Congressional District, David Sullivan, who is like a brother to me, who just randomly one day said, Themis, the woman who is your state representative is not running again, so it'll be an open seat. You should run for that seat. And my answer was, and I've told this story to hundreds of candidates who I meet with who are afraid they don't know enough about politics, they haven't been involved in it before. My answer was, I don't even know what the state rep seat is. I didn't know what towns it was. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I think I was one of those average people that had an interest in politics and paid attention to a certain extent, but didn't know the details like we all know them. Excuse me, they're involved in it every day. And that's how it started. I did some research and I figured it out. And we ran a race, and I was very lucky to have some very good people around me to direct me, because I didn't know how to do it. I knew nothing about it. Running races. I mean, I knew that I grew up in that area and I felt very strongly about it. And my parents always taught us that, I don't care how you do it, but you have to give back, because you've been given a lot of things. And you've been very fortunate in life. So that's why I did it. But I went in, scared and a little bit quiet. And as far as a politician can be, I was a little bit quiet. Now I'm just, the loudmouth Greek girl who doesn't take any crap from anybody and kind of puts it all on the table. So, I mean, I think it's really confidence is really what it is. I mean, you develop your skill set about speaking in public and being confident about what you know and how you can express it and how you express it. And I think that's really what the main difference is.
It's interesting. I hear women politicians talk about, because often when I interview females in elected office, they usually feel they have to prepare more for an interview. Like Rosa DeLauro, even though she doesn't get serious opponents, when I interview her campaign time, she comes with like 100 pages of articles and documents. And I say, why do you do that? And she said, as women, we always feel we have to prepare more. Guys kind of feel like you talk about being shy at first, you didn't know much. The males go in and they kind of feel like I can just wing it, I'll be fine. Whereas women kind of feel like I have to know everything about what I'm talking about when I go up there. Is that true for you? Or did your background kind of make you feel more confident, even though you were shy at the beginning, you didn't know everything because you feel more comfortable jumping into a man, what used to be more of a man's domain?
Well, remember, I was painfully shy growing up. So
Hmm.
the shyness that I had when I ran for office was me being outgoing, relative to what I was like before. I mean, if I had been that shy, I certainly couldn't have run for office at all. And as far as what used to be a man's domain, I mean, let's be honest, there's still only 20 something percent of women in the Connecticut General Assembly. I mean, it's still, I am the only woman leader in the entire legislature. We sit at these leaders' meetings. I'm the only woman there. Um, and interestingly enough, for a party that's anti-woman, I'm the only woman leader, and I have the highest percentage of women in the legislature, in the House Republican
So that
caucus.
hasn't changed. I mean, you came in era after Ella Grasso had been governor. What has it not changed then? Is the legislature still, you saying, a man's domain? Has there been any change in what it's like? Like
No,
your
I think
sister
it's
now
actually,
is,
listen, it's moved around, right? I mean, there's some years it's higher, some years it's a little lower, but it's not any higher than when I came in.
so
It's
why
just,
is that?
I don't, a woman, an older woman leader once told a story at an event she and I were speaking, and she once said, "Here's the difference between men and women. That if somebody says to a woman, you should really think about running for office. The first thing is, well, I don't know if I can do it. Do I know enough? I don't really know the issues, and I have my family, and I have my real job, and I don't know if I'm prepared." And that you ask a man that question, and they will literally look in the mirror and go, "Of course, yeah, I should run. I don't know why I didn't think of that before." No, no, I mean, I'm a little different because I was always that kind of person. I mean, I'm like that now still. I mean, clearly, as I said, my confidence level has increased. I mean, because in this job, you don't get to this point without having, I mean, your confidence level either increases and you get better or you don't stay in it, right? Um, I've just always been that way. It's just been me. And even now, when I make decisions, I look, if there's four sides to something, I'll see six sides. I just, maybe it's the lawyer in me and I'm overly analytical about all the decisions I make. But typically, men and women are like that. There's no question about it. And still in 2020, you see it all the time. You see it all the time.
Themis,
That's women.
what's your,
Women are different kind of decision makers than men, right? The process that they use and the result that they get is different, and I think in a lot of ways it's better.
yeah, I definitely want more people seeing six sides than one side. Themis, what is your proudest moment over 22 years? And what is the moment you look back and say, "Ooh, Themis, I really learned something from what happened that day"?
Well, I mean, I'm lucky that I've had a lot of proud moments. I mean, besides just generally serving as leader to this caucus and serving my district, I think the proudest moment was September 15th, 2017, around 3:30 a.m. when the Connecticut House and Senate minority passed the budget. And through all the research we've done, we still haven't found another minority party who passed their own budget in the whole country ever.
Mm.
And that was a big deal. That was a big deal. I mean, the Senate happened to do it first because, sometimes bills go to the Senate first, sometimes they go to the House first. They happened to do that first. They passed it. We got it downstairs and we didn't pass it till it was between 3 and 4 in the morning. But it was September 15th, 2017. And that was because the numbers of Republicans and Democrats, as you know, in the House and the Senate were so close at that point. It was a 1 vote difference in the Senate and a 4 vote difference in the House. And the majority, for the first time, never passed their own budget out of the Appropriations and Finance Committee for the first time ever that I've been there. And then they couldn't get a budget passed. And we went through the entire summer, all summer long.
What a year that was.
And then, the governor said he would veto it. So we had to make a decision about what we were going to do as a legislature. And we decided to do it on our own. And we ended up passing a budget that was veto proof because we knew the governor would likely veto whatever we came out with. So not only was there a bipartisan budget passed ultimately on that last day of October 2017, but it was veto proof. I mean, typically we just hope to get to 76, right? Just to pass something, which is a civil majority in the House. But I think that year was the best year I've ever served. And I think, although there's no such thing as perfect, and I can pick almost any bill that I've ever voted for, any budget I've ever voted for, and tell you what was wrong with it. That was one of the best budgets we've ever passed because it forced the majority party, who's been in control for 48 of 50 years in this state, legitimately, except for one term in the House and one term in the Senate. For 50 years, the Democrats have been in control of the legislature. So people love to talk about good Republican governors, bad Republican governors, good Democrat governors, bad Democrat governors. It's the legislature that runs the show to a large measure. And they've been controlling it all these years. So that year, we did it together, and it was torture. There's a caucus room in that building now that any one of us, 4 of us walk in now, we have PTSD because we were stuck in there for 6 weeks straight doing that budget. You know, I mean, that year we passed landmark fiscally responsible things like bond cap, spending cap, volatility cap. That's why we have a rainy day fund that's big now. Not because of
it's really paying off.
It's really not because of anything our colleagues have done.
So, Themis, looking back, can you think of a time when you look back and say, I would have done that differently? I really learned something that day.
Every day, probably. I can't think of one off the top of my head, to be honest with you. But every single day, there's something I've done, even if I think I've done it well, there's something I may have done differently. I have a little funny story, though. Many years ago, I had a constituent contact me about something about veterans and burial services, and either not charging them or giving them a discounted rate, something to that effect. And I thought that was probably one of my first couple terms. And I thought that made a lot of sense. So I got our office, they put together the amendments like we normally do and gave it to me. And when the bill came up from the Public Safety Committee, I stood up when Representative Dargan from West Haven, who was the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, stood up and brought out the bill. And I stood up and called the amendment, and he argued against it and voted against it, and it didn't pass. And I was so upset that I started crying, and I went outside, and then Representative Larry Cafaro walked out. He's like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "It was about veterans and burial services. How did he not vote for it?" But it was because he didn't know about it, and I didn't understand in my first or second term that I should go to the chairman and do what I have to do. And Representative Dargan is a very good friend, so that's why I tell this story. It's just one of those things that you kind of it's a baptism by fire thing, because anybody else would understand that I should have done that.
So it sounds like the lesson was that of course you have to know what you're talking about and push for something you believe in, but you also have to talk to the right people before. They're not just going to do something because it's right.
You know what? It's a respect thing, right? Yeah. It's a respect thing. Nobody wants to be blindsided, which I understood after, but because it was such a common sense thing, and we ultimately got whatever it was passed. At the end, I'm like, why would you say that was bad? It was about veterans. We're like yelling at each other outside the chamber. It's like, I just didn't know you were doing it. So that was the way you should react. You should just vote against it. And obviously we brought it back. But that's a little kind of cute story, but it means a lot, because that's not something you teach in Legislator 101. We probably should, but we don't, because there's certain things that are just ingrained in us. And when the new guys come in, after all the things we teach them, some things are just natural to you, and you're not thinking that you should tell them that. But yeah, I think we do a lot better job at it now.
Harry Joe, station manager, WNHH. What questions do we have from our callers and our listeners?
Yeah, we're not going to get to all of them, but
let's give a sample.
You have Jim, Joey, Debbie, and others hoping you run for governor. Peter Jenkins thinks you should run for Congress. And then you have Christopher Champagne, who is wondering, when is the state going to open? And then you have quite a few people: Mark Giuliano, Sherry, Don Crouch, all asking about the unfairness of essential employees working for regular pay, while unemployed people are going to be paid more than the essential employees who have to show up for work.
All right, let's take those in order. Thank you, Harry. And Themis, I forgot to mention gig workers too. I've been talking to one restaurateur who said, I closed because it wouldn't be safe for my restaurant to be open, but my workers are getting more money because of the unemployment. But a lot of other restaurants were paying people under the table, so they couldn't get paid in this. So therefore, they're now endangering their workers by staying open so they could at least get some money. Any thoughts on that and what the caller was saying about what he saw as the unfairness? Thank you, Harry.
No, thank you for that question. It's a problem. And when people are being paid under the table, obviously that's not something we can really control. And that's been an issue. The other problem, I think you mentioned, or the caller mentioned, is a lot of these people are getting their unemployment. And when you combine that with the federal stimulus unemployment, a lot of them they're getting paid more than they get paid for their regular job. So they're not even dying to go back to work. So that's another complication with all of this.
And Themis, everyone's been asking about governor. You've made it clear you're considering running for governor. I take it, is it still true that you're not in a position where you say, yes, I'm going to run for governor in 2 years, or no, it's way too early for that?
I will say this to you. I made the decision I made because I thought it was the right one at the time about running for the House again. But I did say my time in public service isn't over, which clearly means I'm thinking about other things. And I will just tell you this. My love for the state of Connecticut and my passion for it has not waned at all since I first started. And my need and want to help the state any way I can has not ended and has not lessened at all. So stay tuned.
One person who's staying tuned is Colin McEnroe, a columnist for Hearst newspapers. What a funny column that was. He said the reason he doesn't want to get COVID-19 because he wants to make sure he's healthy and alive and able to cover the 2022 governor's race between Republican Themis Klarides and Democrat Susan Beiswitz. He said he respects both of you and you're both tough competitors and that'll be a fight. Do you imagine we might be seeing an all-female governor's race?
Why not? Right? Why not? By the way, just quickly, my sister is listening, watching, whatever, and she wanted me to tell you that my biggest accomplishment has been getting her to run for the House and winning.
And we did a really fun show with that, and I hope we'll do that again one day too. So Themis, if you do run for governor, it is a 2-year endeavor, right? One doesn't announce formally. At least. So that means you really would have to quietly be doing it now, right?
Well, let me just say this. I've been a leader for 6 years. I've been in the House for 22 years. Every day I'm doing things to either help my district or help the state of Connecticut. I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to do everything I can, continue to do so, getting the state out of this COVID crisis, getting them healthy, getting people back to work when the time is right. And then we're going to run elections. We're going to run races. We're going to do everything that we usually do in an election year. So I'm going to continue to do all that, which continues me in the direction of helping the state of Connecticut. And then I'm going to do whatever due diligence I need to make the decision that I would likely make towards the end of the year.
And I guess what's interesting to me is like Erin Stewart, right? The mayor of New Britain, another Republican woman who might run. I imagine people are going to want you to decide on the early end because they're going to need to decide whether to jump in otherwise, right? I mean, there's no point in her running if you ran because you'd be kind of going to the same pool and you've been at it longer and you have the statewide connections, right? So do you feel any pressure to decide earlier so other people know since you would be a front runner?
Well, let's remember the election isn't for 2 years and 6 months from now.
Yeah.
Clearly, this is a 2-year endeavor. There's no question about it. And that's why I'm going to be using the next 6 months till the end of the year, whatever, 8 months, to be doing some final due diligence in regards to what I think would be best for me and how I best can serve the state of Connecticut, right? So I think that that's pretty early to announce.
Yeah.
If that was the direction I went in. But I will just say this. I've been so fortunate getting so many phone calls, emails, texts for the past 3 years, quite frankly, about running, if that's what I wanted to do. And since I announced I wasn't running for the House, people have been so supportive and so excited for the prospect that I might do that. And clearly there's other people that are interested or might be interested, and it's their prerogative to do, whatever they choose to do. But I think that people who would be supportive of me are going to be supportive of me. If they would go with somebody else because I'm not going to be in it, that's different. But I think those people would have talked to me about it, and I've made it very clear that my time in public service isn't over. So.
Yeah, and I won't play that reporter game of asking you another times the same question in different ways so you can not answer it 9 other times. I think you did answer it. What about the role? We've talked about this before with Donald Trump. I would argue, I don't know if you agree with this or not, in 2018, the reason that Mont got elected was because of Donald Trump. People just wanted to vote against Donald Trump somehow in Connecticut. Sure, there were a lot of other factors, and if he had not been able to say a sentence out loud, he would have lost or something like that. But what do Republicans face this year as you help other candidates run, and as people run in 2 years? How is Donald Trump affecting the state's GOP? Is it someone to embrace, given that the Republican base here supports him? Or is he someone you need to keep a distance from, given that independent voters, at least in 2018, did not?
Well, listen, I think it's it depends on what part of the state you're in. I think that Connecticut is even though it's the third smallest state in the country, it's very truncated in regards to political affiliation and the lines of a spectrum you're on as a Republican or even a Democrat. Whether it's Donald Trump or Barack Obama or George Bush or whatever president you want to talk about, clearly those presidents do some things you agree with and do some things you don't agree with. But anybody who voted 2 years ago against a Republican because they didn't like Donald Trump, I think it's been made very clear with a $1.7 billion tax increase that was put forward last year and a $3 billion deficit for the state of Connecticut, and the middle class being hurt more than anyone else, and a special transportation fund that's been raided, and an economy that's foundering. I think it's been made very clear that voting against people who are actually the people that are going to move this state forward because you don't like somebody else who has nothing to do with them may not be the most prudent course of action. So I feel very comfortable with what we've done in Connecticut. If you love Donald Trump, that's great. If you hate Donald Trump, that's great. But you should understand that there's a federal group we have in the country, and there's a state group. And if you think that the two highest tax increases in the state's history, the most borrowing we've ever had, and after all of that with a new governor, still raiding that special transportation fund, wanted to take more money out of your pocket because of tolls, and putting a $1.7 billion tax increase that hurt the middle class or the people you want running this state, then you should vote for the same people again. If you don't, then it would be time to try something else.
How about with COVID-19 crisis, leaders get tested? How have Governor Lamont and President Trump done with COVID-19? Have they been the leaders we need?
This is going to sound strange, but I'm going to put them both in the same box for this answer. I think whether it's Donald Trump, who's been in office for 4 years, Governor Lamont, who's been in office for a year and a half, me, who's been there for 22 years, Senator Fasano, who's been there for 18 years. This is a situation none of us have ever dealt with in our lifetime. There's no rule book for this. There was no practice leading up to this. I think they've all done things well. I think they've all done things that they should change. And so for me, this is about making sure we properly balance while understanding that health of people and safety of people is the first and foremost consideration, trying to figure out what a plan going forward when we know that it's safe to start to slowly move this economy forward, what that plan is and what it looks like. I think, there's nobody that these people that are saying, let's just open everything up and it's your responsibility if you want to wear a mask or not. Okay, that's an extreme view that I do not agree with. But I think most people understand that we want to stay healthy, and we don't want this after 6 weeks of social distancing and wet mask wearing and staying home. We don't want this to ramp up again right away, which could easily happen if we just start all this over again. But there is a way to do this when the time is right with the health experts to slowly start integrating this again. And we need to know what that plan is.
State Representative Themis Clarity, thanks for joining us today in WNHH-FM. Thanks to everyone who's sending questions. I always love talking to you, Themis. And congratulations on a great 11 terms in office. I hope you enjoy amid this pandemic when things can be kind of depressing. I hope you enjoy all the good feelings you're getting from across the aisle about your 22 years. Congratulations on getting married soon. I
Thank
think
you.
that's a
Thank
great
you.
thing. And good luck in making your decisions about your next step.
Well, thank you, Paul. I mean, an hour's a long time, but with you, it flies by. So I look forward to doing it again.
Same here. And Harry Joes, thanks to our station manager, the miracle man behind the controls who gets us on so many dimensions of cyberspace, I've given up counting. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass, inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night at WNHH-FM, New Haven's home, community radio.